apologize. I thought my watch was not updating. It's 2:20 already. All right, good afternoon. Yeah, see, they're excited. Look at that. On cue. On cue. All right, everybody awake? Woo! I was joking. We were in the last session. We were like, poor Shane. We had just had lunch and then to talk about P&Ls. Get a bunch of numbers. So you're laughing because you're nodding off, weren't you? Don't you nod off in this session. I've got my eye on you. Let me find my glasses so I can actually see. Okay, good afternoon. You're here because we're going to talk about real estate. Anybody, when it comes to the site selection process for the brand, anybody just like, gosh, this is a little bit nerve-wracking? Anybody in here? You all feel comfortable. Why are you in here then? I'm joking. Okay. So my name is Cynthia Lee. I'm the president of KW Commercial. I also specialize in franchising. I've been in franchising for over a decade, and I always jokingly say my gateway drug into franchising was Massage Heights, based in San Antonio, Texas. And I'm excited. I'm now married into the family, so my sister-in-law invited me here today. So thank you for that. Thank you, Shane. So if you meet Shane, there she is. So I love it. I specialize in the site selection process, and you're going to hear from an esteemed panel of gentlemen who also do the same thing. They represent the franchisor. They work for the franchisor. I've had the pleasure of already speaking with all of them, and this is phenomenal information. So if you are a note taker, you're probably going to want to take a few notes in this one, okay? So I'm going to quickly just at least run through our panel today and brag on these guys, right? So let's start with Todd Evans, Chief Franchise Officer for Franchise Group, Inc. So Todd, he's served as the CFO, yay, since 2022, overseeing 5 brands in the portfolio with about 2,200 locations? Not many, just a few, including Vitamin Shop, Pet Supplies Plus, you name it, they've got it, right? And then prior to joining the franchise group, Todd served as the BP of franchising with You Break, I Fix. Anybody ever go to You Break, I Fix? Who was broken their cell phones, right? Okay, Todd's your guy, that one. And then and Rent a Tire and Aaron's Rents. Anybody ever use Aaron's Rents? I did. Yeah, I did. Awesome. Welcome, Todd. Over 22 years of experience in franchising. I think maybe about 30. So welcome, Todd. Awesome. Dave Vergosa. Dave, you want to raise your hand? Right here, blue suit. Dave is the VP of Franchise Development for Vintage Hospitality Group, and he is for development with Ford's Garage, and has been in franchising for 20 plus years. And his noteworthy career positions include Director of Franchising at Inspire Brands. It's a global multi-brand restaurant company where he led franchising for Arby's and Sonic, yummy. And then prior to that, Dave worked with other Inspire brand concepts such as Jimmy John's, BWW, and Rusty Taco. Awesome. Good experience. Love it. Okay, then we have Herb Heiserman, EVP of Development for Zoom Room. Does anybody know what Zoom Room is? What is it? It's a place for dogs. It's not the thing that you get on every single day. That's called a Zoom room for, having to do Zoom calls. But this Zoom room is actually a gym for dogs. Love it. And a great name because everybody knows what Zoom is, right? So it gets their attention and say, what is that? So Herb is and I'm going to embarrass him, a highly acclaimed architect, and he's regarded as a leading figure in design and construction across the retail and hospitality fields. Herb brings a wealth of experience from his prior work with renowned brands such as Starbucks, Whole Foods, Panera, and Banfield. His role isn't just about constructing buildings, it is about crafting experiences. I like that. Prior to Zoom Room, he served as managing principal at Street Sense, specializing in the real estate, retail, and hospitality industries. So welcome, Herb. And last but not least, we have Mike Weinberger, CEO of Community Franchise Group, a seasoned entrepreneur and franchise expert with a passion for guiding emerging business towards success. With over 2 decades of experience in the franchise and legal fields, he has dedicated his career to helping franchise concepts reach their potential. So you want to talk to all of these gentlemen. From refining operational strategies to crafting franchise sales programs, offering legal counsel, and devising strategic plans, Mike has been instrumental in transforming budding ideas into thriving franchise businesses, such as Kahala Brands, MTY Food Group, Maui Wowie, Unity Road, Cold Stone Creamery, and Orange Theory Fitness. So, big round of applause for our esteemed panelists. Good job. So just to get a feel for our audience before we jump into some questions, and just a show of hands, how many of you in here have over 10 units, over 10 franchisees? Okay, very good. And how many of you have a site selection process already dialed in, or you feel you have one dialed in? Decently, okay? And raise your hand. How many of you have had a candidate come through that says, well, I'm not going to sign a franchise agreement until I know that there's real estate available? Okay? If you didn't raise your hand, you will be raising your hand probably in what, about a month or so? Give it a month, give it about 6 months, you're going to get that question and or objection. So I wanted to start out with that just because it has become more common. All of us have seen that. And I would love to hear your feedback of how do you handle that? Because remember, a best practice, right, is that you want a candidate to buy in based on the brand, not the real estate. Because guess what? When things go awry, they have to have a passion in the brand. That's what's going to keep them going, not the real estate necessarily. So how do you handle it when a candidate comes through and they say, I don't want to sign until I get real estate? I think we're going to start with Dave on this one.
Thank you. I would say I would start with setting the right expectations. So for me and our team and the training that we put in, it really starts with the sales process. So when you first get a candidate in to signing a franchise agreement, to site selection, I think it starts from kind of day one, setting the expectations properly that, yes, we'll review a certain DMA, we'll review certain real estate, but the key is that we're not going to do a deep dive due diligence on a site until you're actual franchisee. We have a great team, but they're servicing our current franchise system, right? So there's only a certain amount of bandwidth you have. So I've always found it important right from the get-go, kind of explaining that process to a potential franchisee so they understand what step and when does site selection come in, how deep do you go into that process. So you talked about kind of having a site ID and the kind of a site ID form. On our forms, the same thing, so potential franchisees get to see it. They understand that, hey, that site selection doesn't happen until you're actually a physical franchisee. So that's how we kind of focus on, and I think, again, when you nip it in the bud and you set the right expectations right from the beginning, it's a much easier process.
Okay. Todd, I think you were going to comment on this one too.
Yeah, just reinforce what Dave said, and that's exactly right. How you get into the queue with our real estate team is you sign a franchise agreement and pay a franchise fee. You have to buy a ticket to get into the show, and without that ticket, we don't have the capacity to spend time with you. So part of our secret sauce is our site selection, lease negotiation process, and you have to be part of the team before we're going to avail that secret sauce to you.
Yeah, love it. Herb?
So our tactic is a little bit different because we have 70 plus stores open, but we're in 30 states. So there's a lot of territory out there that is not spoken for. And it's not as if we deliver an actual site, but we will discuss, same as MSAs, we'll discuss our demographic, our key tenant, co-tenancies, and narrow in an area. And we're getting a lot of traction in places like Austin where we have a location or two. We want to build the market out greater. We want multiple unit investors, and we will have a little deeper of a conversation. Again, not main on main, but we will talk about where our demographic is, where we're looking to build, and where we're looking to grow our brand within that market. So we go a little bit further.
So give them the sizzle, but not the steak.
That's a good way of putting it.
Mike?
Yeah, don't do it. It's a cart and there's a horse, right? Like, I agree with everything they said. You can kind of show them how you do it, give them a taste of what that process is going to be, but site selection and lease negotiations are very heavy, take a long time, and do not get married to the dirt. A franchisee, or especially a prospective one, and I've only learned this from experience, you can get tied to a piece of real estate, and then it screws up your entire dev process. So, yeah, don't do it.
As an emerging brand, though, it sure is tempting.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I specialize in emerging brands, but we just don't do it because it really can throw you way off.
Yeah,
It's they are two big decisions: picking the franchisee picking you, the award process, and then picking real estate, because you can't move your location. I mean, you can, but usually for $3 million, a couple $1 million that you're not going to, keep them totally separate.
Yeah, I agree.
I would say one other note is if you do get a potential franchisee that has a piece of real estate already, make sure that they love the brand, not the real estate, right? So that's happened to me over my 20-year career, certainly. And it's just reinforcing that, hey, are you in love with the brand or because of the brand fits in your real estate portfolio? So that's really, really important because, again, you can go spend a lot of time and effort, as Mike said, into a process, and then they walk because you don't approve that real estate selection for them. So it's critical that, I know we're talking about real estate, but that franchisee has to love the brand that they're getting into.
And I think it's risky as well because you don't know if you're being shopped, right? So if you do go on that real estate hunt before they sign an agreement, I mean, what if they're secret shopping you? You know, and then they don't sign and then they go with the competitor and then they take that space. That's a great location. So something else. Okay, great. Let's move on to the next question. This one, I love this one, and I know some of you raised your hand and said that you have at least somewhat of a real estate process dialed in. I would like to hear what each of you have just in terms of what does the site selection process look like? What does that infrastructure look like? And keep in mind, these are emerging brands, and so they're not going to have a full staff, in-house ready to handle all of that. So how do you go about that? You want to start back with Mike? We'll just go down the row.
Yeah, I've been with big brands and small brands and emerging brands, so it really depends on the brand. Right now, currently building that process. So for me, location is everything other than franchisee selection. So spend an inordinate amount of time finding locations, understanding demographics, data. I mean, I know we'll talk a lot about data today, but the data today is ridiculous compared to where it was a decade ago. Like I can tell you, just she shows me this through her company. I can tell you where you all went to breakfast this morning, probably what you had, where you went after the party last night, because of your cell phone. Big Brother's watching and tracking. Now that's going to show you traffic patterns that help understand your demographic, male, female, spending patterns, and all that. So data is key, and the rest of it is just. As we said, once you bring a franchisee in, a lot of franchisees, this isn't what they do for a living. They did other things. Don't let them get married to dirt. Oh, it's close to my kid's school. Oh, the commute's better. That's not what this is about. It's about a business, right? So spending time on that. So from an infrastructure standpoint, unless you're a giant company, outsourcing it and using partnership groups, I think is key. There's a lot of really good ones out there that they do this every day. And it makes more sense for trying to build an entire internal team. Now, when you get to scale like some of these other companies, that makes sense. You'll bring in a coordinator, a manager, VPs, and you'll run that process. But I like the inside-out approach of having a designated person on the team to usher the franchisees through it, and then using the best in class. And I'd say always touch the dirt. Like make sure you or someone on your plane goes out and does some drive times and make sure it makes sense.
Yep.
You stole everything I was going to say.
Ditto.
I would say two other nuggets I would like to give you from an emerging perspective. If you don't have the financial resources, to Mike's point, find a local broker that you can really lock into that understands your model. One feedback, again, life lessons is make sure that broker also has gone through your discovery process, understands your model. It is not there just trying to find sites for you and submit LOIs for you, right? Because you're going to get a lot of that as well. And there are a lot of really good brokers out there that really care, certainly. So get someone who's committed to your model, understands it. It'll help you kind of build your real estate arm. Some of them will actually come to Discovery Day as well to help you increase value for your franchisee, what's key. And the second nugget I will give you is, again, because I've made the mistake early on, is stay close to your market. Grow adjacent markets. It's tough. You're going to get leads from all over the country sometimes, and it's hard to say no, but it's most likely the right decision. So kind of grow within your market and then expand from that point, I think, is critical.
Okay. So far I've heard data. Make sure you have at least a preliminary look at what the data looks like for sites. But what goes hand in hand with that is knowing who your customer is, because if you've got to figure out who your customer is before you can really dive deeply into that data. But then to Dave's point, if you're going to hire outside help, you've got to be able to give them a list of the minimum brand standards. Basically, what is the site criteria? So if you don't have a one sheet that says this is the square footage range, this is the type, the gross rental rate, the max that we can go to, things of that nature, then it's going to be difficult for your real estate partner to nail that real estate selection. Okay. Herb.
So I'll tag a little bit on to what Dave said in the sense of setting a real estate strategy is the words that I'll put to it. Since we are now in 30 states, but only have 70-plus locations, you can imagine that I have one in Albany, I have one in Houston, and I have one in Minneapolis. So it's hard to build a brand awareness, and we are now backing into a real estate strategy to grow out markets that we know our demographic exists in. We've done all the ESRE studies. We know who our customer is. We then can find out through data and predictive analytics of where they're going to be. And we also leverage outsource. Same thing you were talking about. We hired a master broker on staff. Not on staff, I'm sorry. We hired an outsourced master broker who then connects with the local real estate community who are experts in the real estate space and know our co-tenancies, our demographics, everything that we're looking for backing into that real estate strategy. So we're strong in Southern California. We're going to continue to build out that market. We know we can do really well in Denver. We have 2 locations there. Unfortunately, Lincoln, Nebraska, we have a unit, but it's not on the list right now. So we're backing into that sort of real estate approach.
And can you explain, does everybody understand what a master broker is versus boots on the ground?
It's just somebody that polices our principles, that what Lindsay was speaking of, the minimum requirements for what we need, and understands and has sat in our discovery days so they can teach, if you will, the local community on how to do it.
And that person is typically, again, not on a payroll. So that master broker will receive a percentage of the commission that the boots on the ground agent earns, okay? So just to be clear, the advice so far that you're getting, this is not anybody that you're hiring as an emerging concept or emerging brand. You're not going to hire anybody and put them on a payroll. You're going to farm out you're going to farm out that business to a real estate expert, okay? And then they earn off of what the landlord pays, okay? Everybody clear on that? Good. Todd.
Yeah. So in an effort to not be redundant with what my esteemed panelists have said, I'm going to take it a little different direction. Oftentimes, the biggest decision, the biggest financial decision that a franchisee is going to make is signing that lease. Mm-hmm. It's more expensive than the royalties they're going to pay, the build out. It is hands down the most expensive decision that they're going to make as a franchisee. And no one is more committed to a franchisee finding the best possible location at the best possible price than them. So what we encourage franchisees to do, being respectful of any relationships that they have with master brokers or whatnot, is to get out there and work the streets yourself. Burn some rubber off your tires, burn some shoe leather off your shoes, knock on the doors. If there's a shopping center that you like and it's full, go tenant to tenant in that shopping center. Find out who the landlord is. Find out if anybody has a lease that's coming up. But it's incumbent upon the franchisee to really put themselves in a position of negotiating strength. So if they sign a 4-unit ADA, they need to be looking at all 4 markets simultaneously. Get 8, 10, 12 deals going so you can negotiate very, very aggressively, or put your broker in a situation where they can negotiate very, very aggressively on your behalf. And we were joking earlier about what I encourage our franchisees or brokers that work with our franchisees to do is don't stop negotiating with that landlord until they cuss at you or hang up on you. Because usually they're about as low as they're going to go if they do one of those 2 things. So put that responsibility back on the franchisees and make sure that they're very involved in the process.
I love that. Good. Any other comments on that? Okay. This is an important one. What challenges are we seeing right now in real estate? Okay, so how many of you, how many of you on an annual basis are double checking what the rental rates are doing in the local market or wherever your brands are? You do it? Okay, because let me tell you, in 1 year's time, it has changed dramatically. And so what we've seen, and especially working with a lot of emerging concepts, is that we'll see that first location, the one that you're basically building your FDD off of, you got a killer deal on that, right? So now you build your FDD on that. Oh, but now you've got franchisees. They start going to look for real estate, and suddenly the numbers aren't adding up. Has anybody experienced anything like that? Yes. Yep. It can be a dangerous situation. So what I would like to hear, and how about we'll start then on Todd and come back this way, just if each of you can kind of just walk us through some of the challenges that you are experiencing as a franchisor and what they should be aware of.
Yeah, well, relative to the item 19, it's critical, and I don't want to steal any of Dave's thunder here, but you know, his whole theme is just be honest, and I love that. I absolutely love that. And if you were able to get a killer real estate deal on your first couple of locations in your item 19, and that's just not market right now, be super transparent with your franchisees on that. You know, let them understand that, and let them understand also that every store that gets opened is going to be a dogfight. You know, the counter's going to show up with the corner knocked off. For us, particularly on the item 19, we have derivation tables. We show highs and lows. So that just at least gives a franchisee some guardrails to operate in, you know, relative to occupancy cost.
Very good.
So one of the challenges we have, a little different, I think, than my colleagues, is we're a pet services industry. Not many landlords are excited about putting pet services into their centers. So we're battling that regularly. Yet we want the co-tenancies of the Whole Foods and the Trader Joe's and so forth. We want the spaces everybody else does. We also need 3,200 square feet. Does that sound familiar to a lot of concepts that are out there? So it is a drag. It is a fight every day to get that. We have a little different of a model where we're not grooming and we're not doing some of the other services, so we have a little better of approach than that, or a little better system. But I will go back and echo what you said in the honesty piece of, look, that's a great piece of real estate. You can't afford that. We just know. It's over the percentage of your gross income that you're going to, your gross revenue. You can't do that. We, as a business, need to take spaces that are a little off left of center, and we're a destination also. But that's our challenge, truly, in the day by day.
Yep.
I would say, kind of to go off what Herb said too, is I always use the ratio kind of back of the napkin 2-to-1 ratio. So if you're investing $500,000, that business needs to do $1 million. If you're investing $1 million, that should be $2 million. On average, that's kind of numbers. But the point I'm trying to make is you need to know your numbers, right? So what are your full world economics? What can you really afford? What can the franchisee afford for a rent factor? To me, it starts right there. And a lot of folks really don't know, where they have such a wide range, and you can't have a wide range, especially in the beginning. You really need to dial that in and understand that. So to me, I think that's important. I think the other challenge is, during COVID, everyone's fighting for drive-through, right? So you're competing against the big boys for drive-through. If you're a retail space, you're competing for other retail space. I think it's, you know, what Ty was saying earlier is getting ahead of the curve as an emerging franchise. Find a new development, go pound pavement, go find new locations that some other folks aren't looking for. Don't wait for it to come to you, right? Be proactive in that approach, especially when listen, the one great thing is when you're a smaller brand, you can be nimble, you can move a lot quicker than others, right? So some of the bigger brands you see, there's an approval process. It may take them a few months to get an approval process approved for a site. A new brand, you can make a quicker decision, obviously, and get there. So look for new sites in your market. And follow, you know, one of the challenges, follow the big boys, right? So if there's a competing brand that you know that you're competing with, where are they going? Start doing some research. Can you go adjacent to them, potentially to find a site? So just kind of getting a little creative in that. The reality is it's tough. There's no secret sauce. There's nothing I'm going to tell you that's going to be perfect, that, hey, this is how you do it. You just got to get your hands dirty.
Yep. What was the question? Challenges.
Try not to echo. I think some of the things I've seen lately, and it is boots on the ground. One would be the site looks great, everything's good, and then you open, and the city decides to do construction. Right? It sounds weird, but you can check into these things before. We have a bar. One of our concepts, we have a bar around the corner. It's been open a year, and they just shut down the street next to it, and there's scaffolding up. So you're building a business, you're getting brand equity, awareness, and then all of a sudden, there's impacts that have nothing to do with you. So just spending that extra time, put it on your site selection checklist. Let's just say I think mine's 100 points, right? Put that on there. Like, was construction done lately? What's coming in that area? The other thing I've recently been dealing with is there's some beautiful new developments, right? Hey, we're going to do big box, we got it all coming in, right? So you go to sign a lease and you're ahead of the game. Awesome. You're ahead of the game on leasing. But what is the rest? What is occupancy, vacancy, and when are they going to turn on the space? You need to embed that. The location could be great, but if you're the only one there, unless you're just driving the whole center, which most of us aren't, it's going to be a problem. So, not to say don't do the site, but there's ways to negotiate in there percentage rent or just percentage rent for an extended period of time, or vacancy and occupancy clauses where you're paying a threshold. I think those are important things. When the good real estate comes, you want to move on it, but being the first one is not always an advantage. Sometimes you're going to have disadvantage, especially when everyone around you is still building and doing things. So those are two things I probably dealt with twice this week.
I like that. I sometimes say you don't want to be too early to the party. You don't want to be too late, but you also don't want to be too early to the party. Another clause, you talked about some clauses to get added in. If you're in a big box center and you're relying on a certain anchor to bring you traffic, like let's say a grocery store, for example, you want to try to add in a clause that says that if that anchor tenant leaves and they vacate that space, because it takes a while to turn over a large space like that you will pay half rent until they can fill that space. There needs to be some sort of a clause like that if you're able to negotiate that in, especially if you're relying on that big box to bring you the traffic. Let's go back to setting the expectations with the incoming franchisee, because you're excited, you're an emerging concept, you're like, yeah, I'm going to give you a real life example. This actually just happened to me last week with a brand. They got us on with the new franchisee and they said, okay, well, we're ready to open in October. I went, that's in 2 weeks. And they said, oh yeah, but that was what we were told, October. And I said, that's impossible. Like I put up the timeline, the average timeline of opening a location. So somebody along the way, either they missed it or something did not happen there. And I went, okay, we're gonna have to do a little bit of a course correction. So let's just talk about, can we just at least go through, give everybody an example of what does that conversation sound like? Because they get excited and they like to sometimes jump ahead of themselves on it. Anybody jump in?
I'll start. It depends on the brand, right? So if you're a QSR, casual dining, or other business, depends on kind of what your brand is. But for us, typically, we set the expectation. It's typically about 12 months to sign your lease. It's 18 months to get one of our restaurants open. And I think it's critical we do multi-unit. So when you're doing a multi-unit development deal, again, going back to the word of honest, being honest with them, what does that development schedule look like? The worst thing you want to do is put a really aggressive development schedule in, especially for a brand new franchisee that has never ran a business before. They're not going to hit their timelines, and then you're dealing with other issues, with legal issues, defaults, and other things. You're going to have to memorialize in an agreement to modify what you don't want to do. And again, it goes back to the relationship aspect of it. You're really starting to build a bad relationship with the franchisee. They're going to be pissed at you because of this issue. So I think for us, again, it's setting that 12-month timeline for lease. It's 18 months for your first store, and then being realistic, depending on what market you're in, with demographics, where you're at, of course. If you're downtown Atlanta versus some other markets, right, you have to be a little more lenient in terms of the development schedule, but it's having that expectation right from the get-go. We train our team the same thing, like be honest with them that this is the process. I always say this is, our attorneys hate saying this, but we're partners, right? So I want a great relationship with you. It's not always going to be perfect. We're not always going to get it right, but you're going to get the honest truth for us, and this is what it's expected to be a successful franchisee in the system.
Yeah, very good. Todd? Setting expectations.
Yeah. So I've been involved in thousands of franchise store openings, not hundreds of franchise store openings, thousands of franchise store openings. And it seems like if you've opened up that many stores, like this process would be rote. Like everything would flow smoothly. I see smiles down there from the Catalyst team. Trust me, every location that we've opened has been an absolute dogfight. I mean, it is a process, not an event. And you need to set the expectations properly with the franchisees that, what can go wrong probably will go wrong. So, be prepared to get the dirt of the business under your fingernails. That's why you became a franchisee. And if you follow this process and you're up for the fight, you know, you're going to be successful with this thing. But you know, you just want to set those expectations that what can go wrong will go wrong. And when it does happen, you know, they can't be too terribly upset with you because you set the expectations properly.
Yeah, excellent, good. Any other feedback, Herb?
I just want to phrase it a little differently. I've been fortunate enough in my architecture world to be a professor. And I think what we all are is educators. and that's the way I'd like to phrase it, because you're working with somebody that is not sophisticated in the space, usually, in the world that I'm working in. And time and cost are always misunderstood. 2 weeks to do a store, a week to design a store, whatever it might be, to build a store. So, you know, you're always educating them on things they've never heard of, exclusivities. You know, why can't we go there? Well, PetSmart has an exclusivity. You know, why can't we serve beer? Well, you need a liquor license. So I'm being silly, but you are always educating. I think you need to come into this job knowing that you're educating your client or your partner, for that matter.
And that's where having somebody like a master broker will really help. So obviously, the onus is on you to come up with what are the site requirements. You know, what are the minimum brand standards that have to be met for a location? You have to have that piece, at minimum, have that piece. But then make sure that you've educated your real estate partner so that they can go out and be your voice and they can be the catch-all. Because you don't want to be getting phone calls, right? At 10 o'clock at night, you know, panicked franchisees saying, I can't find a location, I'm stressed out or whatever. Your real estate person is supposed to be that go-between, okay? Because as you grow, you're going to get too busy to take those types of phone calls. So you want to make sure you have the real estate process really dialed in. Any other feedback on that one?
Yeah, I would just say, as like education is a good term. I'd say be steady and be firm. Like it is your brand as a franchisor, and you have other franchisees you need to protect. So you know what's best. If these franchisees knew what was best, they wouldn't actually probably be franchisees. So you don't have to be harsh, but everyone in their FDD has the right to approve sites, end of day. And you can just say that from the beginning. Look, we're doing what's best for you. We want, you know, your community and your people better. You know where it should be, but we know from our experience, and that's where that relation needs to come. Because if you and it happens every time, franchise, this is the best site. If I don't get this site,
Yep.
I'm going to jump off the roof. I'm going to call my lawyer. My wife's going to divorce me. All right, fine. And then that site goes away, and what happens? There's another site. So you have to smile at them and be nice, but you have to hold the line, because otherwise you're going to regret it, and they're going to regret it, and they're going to blame you anyway. You do the best you can do, and site selection is, I'd say it's as important as franchisee selection, right?
Yeah, outstanding. Because if you get the location wrong, then the brand, you know, what does that say about the brand? You have to get the right locations to help build up that brand. So last question, then we'll open it up for a couple of questions. We have about 10 minutes to go. I saw a few people raise their hands who realized and recognized the fact that the base rental rates in retail have risen dramatically in the past year. But yet you're stuck in this lease, you know, and now your rates are going up, your CAM fees are going up. How do you adjust the model if they're already in business and now the rent's kind of gobbling them up? What do you do? How do you adjust the business model on them while still providing value? Like, how do you guide the franchisee in that situation? Woo!
I'll hit it. I mean, you do everything, right? The world, year ago, let's say it's a 10-year lease, right? 5 to 10-year leases, that's pretty standard. The world changes pretty quick, right? So technology, locations, competition, your business changes. So from the inside, making sure they're running a tight business, looking at their numbers. It's okay to increase prices as a franchisor, have your franchisees increase it. If your rent's going up 2 to 3%, why your price is not going to go up the same? The customer is used to that. Everyone gets scared. I can't increase my prices, I'm going to lose customers. Well, if you actually, and I'm not good at this, but I have people who are, you run the numbers, it's actually better to lose a few customers and increase your price than to hold that and do it. And then if adding different things to your model, depending whether your food service, fitness, it doesn't matter. There's other ancillary streams of income you can bring in to subsidize that rent. And the last thing is be friends with your landlord, right? They're remarkably open, some of them. Some of them you have to push a little harder, but like, hey, they don't want you to go out, right? They don't, right? It's a pain in the ass for them too. They just want you to pay your rent, and even if you configure a system there. So it's just tricks of the trade of always staying on top of your business before things change too quickly and you can't handle it.
And I like that. I'll just add real quick about the being friends with the landlord. Here's the thing is that I know sometimes if you're not in commercial real estate, it's easy to look at a landlord and think they're like Darth Vader, on the ship or whatever, right? They actually do, to Mike's point, they want to work with you. And that's why a lot of them request or demand or make it mandatory that the retail tenant supplies at least monthly or quarterly pro formas to the landlord, because they want to try to catch a potential default in advance. So if you have a franchisee or maybe even yourself who's struggling paying the rent or whatever that may be, your landlord will likely work with you. You just have to tell them what's going on. Just say, hey, this is what occurred. I'm struggling these few months or whatever. Can I get a break, or can we look at whatever that looks like? They don't want a vacancy in their center. Unless you're, of course, paying under market rents and they want to push you out to get somebody else in there to pay market rents. That's a different story. That's a different workshop.
I think that, to your point, Cynthia, I think that's a huge point, though, is as a franchisor, make sure that you have a system where you can track your franchisees' leases and get into detail of when their rent increase, right? They may not know it, but you better know it. And I think the preparation is key. Is a year out, you should have that conversation with the franchisee or the landlord saying, hey, based on our unit economics, I can't increase that revenue in 12 months from now. Let's have that conversation today. Don't wait 9 months out when you only have 3 months left and your rent's increasing at that point. But as a franchisor, I think it's our job too to help our franchisees, and they don't know what they don't know. So especially, ones who are early on as well, make sure that you have a system in place to really track that so you can support and help them before it even gets to that level of issues.
Any other comments?
I don't have anything to join or share other than I echo with their thoughts, but I've actually been quite surprised how landlords have worked aggressively with us in several locations. I'm pleasantly surprised.
Yeah. Todd?
Yeah.
Anything?
I mean, nothing of real value to add other than, you have fixed costs, variable costs, and margin. And margin is what it's all about. And, we do a lot of things focusing on pointing franchisees towards, selling more margin products. But you really get one shot to get that fixed cost right, that occupancy cost. And you want to hit that hard. You only get really one shot at it. You can go back and retrade with the landlords. A lot of times that's hard to do, so spend the time up front.
Yeah, very good. So we have a few minutes for some Q&A. Anybody have a question? You have 4 real estate experts up here. Yes, sir. Tell us who you are.
My name is Hector, Acai Express from Puerto Rico, quick service restaurant, fast casual concept. When you're an emerging brand and you don't necessarily have the resources to put boots on the ground, what is the industry standards to once they actually execute the agreement and you're out of state, right? You have to send someone out of state, plane tickets, hotels, rental car, blah, blah, to support. How many times do you actually visit the site throughout that process until they're open?
It's a great question.
Yeah, for me, like I said, I always have to touch the dirt. So I'd say at least once out there for site selection with technology now, Zoom, like you can walk a site, you can see a site. There's some good outsourced groups that use it. And then trick of the trade, I put a launch fee into my franchise agreements, and I don't make money on my launch fee. It's $10,000 to $15,000 a year franchise fee and a launch fee. The launch fee actually, as an emerging brand, covers those costs. Site selection, dealing a little bit on the real estate construction side, like just internal resources, and then training, right? Because to the point, you sign a franchise agreement, a broker comes, someone takes your commission. You're not making money on that. That's doing. But where's your money coming from if you're not super well funded, right? You're selling some the Sambazon and doing the rest, man. Like launch fees are kind of key just to keep that floating when you go.
Good question.
We do a very similar thing, and the other thing is build your relationships with your service providers, your architects, your general contractors, who can provide a lot of that service for you. But specifically your question, real estate is huge. Then some point toward middle of construction, we use that fee to fund that, and usually turnover and grand opening, we visit the site. So.
And then how often, he asks also, how often do you follow up on make sure they're still complying with everything?
We have operations managers that are checking in with them weekly, actually, to not on site, if you will, but checking in with them weekly.
Yeah, FaceTime, FaceTime or Zoom. They can walk through the whole location. Great question. What else? Yes, sir. Tell us who you are.
Yeah, so my name is Masashi from Suits Waffles, Waffles, Fast County restaurant, breakfast, lunch, dinner, alcohol, functioning. Question I have is, we're still learning, so very new, trying to gain as much information we can. One of the things that now is such an 18-month timeline. So I'm curious if you could give like a rough breakdown of what does that 18-month timeline actually look like? Where does that start from, and what are some of those nuanced things that you learned, and from there we should get?
Did you hear him?
a lot to
What's the
unpack.
development schedule?
Yeah.
Break down the development schedule for from an 18-month perspective.
Well, typically, we start with that 12-month right timeline to find the right location. And I always have a saying, be aggressive but patient. So be aggressive, looking at as many locations as possible, but patient finding that first location. So sometimes we've all been up here. Sometimes you can find a site in 3 months. Sometimes it will take you 12 months or even longer to find that location. So setting the expectation with the franchisee right from the get-go that, hey, that's a realistic timeline. They understand that. From that point, once you have a lease kind of in place, it typically takes a month to 2 months, depending who the landlord is, to go through lease negotiations and kind of execute that lease, have the franchisor or you obviously review it and sign off on that lease as well from that point. Then, depending on your local ordinance, it could take you 2 months to, I've heard, over a year to get a permit.
Yep.
In place. So that's the wiggle room there where it's out of your hands as a franchisor and a franchisee. It's out of your hands kind of process, but that does happen. So to me, it's that 3 to 4 month range typically that I've seen kind of permitting. Again, it depends what market you're in and how busy they are process. And then our build is about a 4-month build. So depending on what your model is, you may have a 12-week build, a 14-week build, depending what it is. You kind of back into that. But the key is to sit down and really plan that out accordingly, kind of work backwards, right? So say, hey, Mike, this is what it looks like to get a store open, and then plug that into your franchise agreement so you can have that conversation with the franchisees when you're going through the process. A little side note I'll say is, and I've learned this, is when you go through the FDD with folks, I know this is a real estate call, when you go through the FDD with folks, go through all the pain points. Don't try to hide from like the main issues of the FDD that everyone kind of wants to glass over, and then you get to that 1 yard line, and then before they sign, they're talking about defaults and all the stuff we don't like to talk about. Get that all out in the beginning, the first kind of a few discovery calls you're having with folks or meetings when you're going through discovery and reviewing your FDD. To me, that's the most important time to get that. They're most excited at that time as well, right? So, and you also as a franchisor want to feel them out. How are they interacting with you, right, in some tough negotiations? Are they friendly? Are you seeing a different side of them? Because also, I say this, when we close a deal, you're handing it off to potentially your operations team or somebody else who now has to live with them for 10 years. And, who are you giving them as a franchisee?
Yeah, I was just going to add to that. Make sure your franchisees are financially well qualified. Make sure they're not going to go broke if it's going to take them 12 months to get that location open. That just puts undue pressure on the franchisee. They make bad decisions when they're feeling that pressure. If somebody doesn't have the financial wherewithal to do the deal, if it's going to take 18 months, 12 months, whatever, to get a location open, don't do the deal. Just don't do the deal. Especially, you new guys out there in franchising who are very, very eager to get points on the board. You're much better served to walk away from somebody who absolutely is not beyond financially qualified.
And here's the catch to that too. I'm glad you brought that up, Todd. That we see a lot of is that emerging brands will just take anybody who walks through the door, says I'm interested, right, and doesn't really truly financially vet them. Guess who actually does financially vet them? The landlord. So do you know how many times we've seen franchisees come through, they get approved, they sign their agreement, you get into the real estate process, and now the landlord's asking for tax returns. They're asking for all of that, right? And the franchisee said, well, the brand never asked me for all of this. Why does the landlord want to see it? And that's when we go, oh, red flag, red flag. You have to make sure that you are financially vetting them, because to your point, when the you know what hits the fan, they've got to have some sort of working capital to float them. You know, they've got to at least have some sort of loan in place. And so just that's a really key piece to it. Yeah. Thank you for bringing that up. That's it. We are done for the day. Thank you so much to our esteemed panelists. They will be here if you'd like to ask more questions afterwards. But good luck, everybody, in the site selection process. Good luck.